when the gas relieving the jets reaches a speed of sound, it can't go any faster.
There is a direct link between the symbol of the Industrial Revolution, the steam engine, and ancient Egypt.
And surprisingly, it only should take about 10 to 14 pounds per square inch, that's 1 atmosphere, for it to reach the speed of sound.
We never heard about it in history classes. We never heard about it in documentaries. But there is an engine that existed in ancient Egypt that could generate an enormous amount of power. Power that the ancient Egyptians Kemet would have used for all sorts of purposes.
This is Heron's engine. It's essentially a steam-powered rocket engine that was invented almost 2,000 years ago. With water and fire, I clocked my Heron's engine at 2,500 RPM.
And the steam engine was in fact a copy of the principle of this machine from ancient Africa. And this machine is called Heron's engine. But then, if I told you that this invention attributed to Heron, the Aeolipile, explains many of the mysteries surrounding how the ancient Egyptians built their temples, you would be right to say, show me. Well, here's a steam engine from the 1st century AD. Here's how it works. You put water into a sphere and heat the sphere up. Very soon, the hot water vapor in the sphere builds up an enormous amount of pressure. And just like in a jet engine, it will seek to exit the sphere from any hole quickly. If well positioned, the sphere starts to rotate. And if the pressure is high and the hole is small, the exiting gas exerts an enormous amount of rotational speed on the sphere. That is a very interesting description of how the device works, because it is almost word for word how the 17th century Italian inventor, Giovanni Branca, described and built his machine. Here is a clear early modern hero-like steam device before the Industrial Revolution. Giovanni Branca's machine shows a jet of steam from a closed vessel driving a bladed wheel, often called an early steam turbine. Branca's engine comprises a wheel with flat vanes, rotated by steam produced in a closed vessel and directed at the vanes through a pipe. He suggested uses for pounding, grinding, raising water, and sawing. And Giovanni's invention is built less than a century after the translation of the Greek text from Hero into Latin. And because this device has been attributed to the Greeks, you must be thinking, wow, we really owe the Greeks everything, including the start to the Industrial Revolution. Well, not so fast. There is actually no direct evidence that Hero actually invented this device. But there is plenty of evidence that this invention was present in ancient Egypt for eons, and that Hero took this invention from the ancient Egyptians themselves. Aside from having lived on the continent of Africa, while his discovery while reported, Hero himself admitted to documenting the various marvels that existed in Kemetic temples. He proceeded to illustrate them in his book, and you can read about it in Pneumatica of Heron of Alexandria. I will remind you that Alexandria is a city founded by Alexander the Great after his conquest of ancient Egypt during the crumbling years of the empire. And if you think that it is far-fetched for me to say that the Greeks took this knowledge from the Africans, here is where the city of Alexandria was, right in the continent of Africa. And here is what the Greeks themselves, namely Pythagoras, had to say about the origin of their sciences. On a visit to Egypt, he became a student of the religion of the people, and was first to bring to the Greeks all philosophy. Isocrates, Busiris, 28. Pythagoras learned from Egyptians his teachings about the gods, his geometrical propositions and theory of numbers, as well as the transmigration of the soul. Diodorus Siculus, Library of History, 1.98.2. In Egypt he lived with the priests and learned the language and wisdom of the Egyptians. Porphyry, Life of Pythagoras, 12. He visited all of the Egyptian priests, acquiring all the wisdom each possessed. And this is just one of the Greek savants that learned in ancient Egypt Kemet before writing on the inventions and notions we attribute to them today. We will come back to this later. For now, let us focus on the fact that the ancient Egyptians had a motor. And what does it really mean if they had a motor? It would explain everything. Well, almost everything. Don't forget that you can support Without History through the links below. Every click of the like button, sharing of the video, and cup of coffee donation helps bring our truth to the next generation. We often think of the ancient Egyptians as having a technology level similar to the Roman era, or the medieval era at best. But what if they had a technology level and engineering level that is pre-industrial revolution? What if, instead of using human and animal muscle for their large projects, they instead used a motor, not too dissimilar from the steam engine of the 19th century? When Heron wrote his book, Pneumatica, which documents many of the mechanical and engineering marvels from Kemetic temples, we should be grateful because he gives us insight into the technical level of the Kemet Ancient Egyptians. Heron, also called Hero, happened to be a 1st century ancient Greek historian. In chapter 21 of his book, he tells us about a sacrificial vessel, which flows only when money is introduced. And I quote, "If into certain sacrificial vessels a coin of 5 drachms be thrown, water shall flow out. When the coin is thrown, it will fall upon the plate and raise the lid, so that the water will flow. But when the coin falls off, the discharge ceases."
The first vending machine was invented in the 1st century AD and was a holy water dispenser. Designed by Heron of Alexandria, it was commissioned by a temple in Alexandria to solve a problem. People were taking too much holy water for the amount of money they paid. The device dispensed holy water when a coin was inserted into a slot. The coin fell onto a plate attached to a lever, which opened a valve and released some water until the coin fell into a receptacle. A counterweight then snapped the lever back into place and turned off the valve. The machine was ready for the next worshipper.
It may seem simple, but building an apparatus, akin to a coin dispenser that only pours holy water when a coin is given, is ingenious. It implies deep understanding of hydraulics, precise weight detection, transfer of that information into a release mechanism. Oh, did you also catch the fact that Kemet already had holy water centuries before the pontifical of Serapion, of Thesis, and the apostolic constitutions? Well, this is a story for another day. In chapter 37, Hero relates to us the miracle of temple doors that open by fire on an altar. And I quote, "On lighting a fire, the door shall open spontaneously and shut again when the fire is extinguished. The heated air will drive out the liquid. The counterweight will open the doors. When the fire is extinguished, the weight shuts the doors." We know that multiple temples had massive doors with drill marks that we can imply were used for hinges. These drill holes themselves are an area of controversy because when we analyze their drill mark patterns, they look like they were done by machines. Hero, or Heron, as he is often called, even documented the fact that Kemetic temples played sounds when the doors were opening. Quote, "The sound of a trumpet may be produced on the opening of the doors of a temple. When the door is open, the vessel will descend into the water and give forth the sound of a trumpet." End quote. This is simply remarkable. The door would be linked to a cord, possibly with a counterweight. This would be extended to a lever attached to a cord that moves when the door moves. That lever could move up and down and cause the movement of air in an air reservoir. That air reservoir would be connected to the trumpets, and all this would be hidden from the person entering the temple. Even if that is not exactly how they did it, it is surprising nonetheless that they had a technology level high enough to execute this. Note that Heron's construction of these devices stemmed from 2 things. The first being that he observed these feats from the Kemetic temples, and secondly, he tried to reproduce what he had seen using what he had learned from the Egyptian priests. Why is this not popularized? Why is it that many of you are hearing about this for the first time? And if ancient Egyptians are as ingenious to produce these devices, which can be considered as gimmicks, then what type of innovation and industry would they have put in place to cut and move stone? We have to be thankful to Heron for his systematic collection and documentation of these apparatus, and his book was a clear attempt to reproduce the magic of the Kemetic priests, while he still had some high priests around. But when it comes to borrowing knowledge from the African priests, he wouldn't be the first, and we will see that later on. For now, let's focus on the Aeolipile and its true meaning for ancient Kemet technology vector.
This doesn't explain that, and investigators are getting mocked for speaking out about it. Drill cores like these have been found all around ancient Egypt, which was the leftover piece that would be thrown away by Egyptian builders after a hole was drilled into granite. Now, modern explanations use a bow drill made from a copper tube to demonstrate how these holes were drilled. And they work. Myth busted. We can move on, right? Not even close. First of all, yes, there are several hieroglyphs that supposedly demonstrate the use of these alleged drills, typically using them on tables, not granite slabs.
If you take a skill saw and you're trying to cut something and you go into it and you realize, oh, you got the angle wrong, you pull it out real quick and then you go back in and make another cut. There's evidence for this.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it slowly with whatever methods they have, they claim they had to cut those stones, you wouldn't be going the wrong way, then pull back out and then start going the right way. You would obviously be going so slow that you would be able to make adjustments along the way.
That's right. And there's plenty of evidence for overcuts, and exactly that type of thing is one of the reasons why I think, look, that we're seeing evidence for, call them power tools, call them just powerful tools that were cutting incredibly hard stone.
One of the major issues with Kemetic society pointed out by the great chematologist Cheikh Anta Diop was that Egyptian priests would keep their most important knowledge wrapped up in layers of secrecy that we call Egyptian mysticism, something very akin to secret society structures today. So higher scientific and engineering knowledge was kept by the inner circle of priests, a circle that only a few were worthy of obtaining. And those who held the most secrets of knowledge were the high priests. They were in the most inner circle of secrecy just outside the pharaoh. The most famous of the high priests in ancient Egypt was none other than Imhotep, the engineer and advisor to King Djoser that was responsible for the building of the first true pyramid in Kemet. But did you know that beyond his skills as an architect, Imhotep is also credited with having written the first medical book in history? The Hippocratic oath that physicians swear upon becoming doctors is really an ode to Imhotep. This papyrus here, the Edwin Smith Papyrus, circa 1600 BCE, is generally considered the oldest surviving medical text from ancient Egypt. It is written in hieratic script on papyrus and describes surgical cases, mostly traumatic injuries, like fractures, wounds, and dislocations. What makes it remarkable is its rational, observational approach. Each case is laid out systematically: title, examination, diagnosis, prognosis, treatment. It avoids magical incantations in many places, relying instead on practical remedies, suturing, bandaging, splints, immobilization. It shows an early form of clinical method. Some call it the earliest surgical handbook. Why am I bringing this up? A civilization that had a scientific method, clearly shown in their medical texts with their approach to observation, documentation, hypothesis, diagnosis, treatment in the domain of medicine, would have certainly applied that approach to all their other domains, including physics, chemistry, engineering, and architecture. So we shouldn't be surprised by the fact that the ancient Egyptians, Kemetu, had mechanical ways to open doors, and also mechanical ways to cut stone and carry stone. And there are signs of this everywhere in Kemet. There are signs of large wheels that could clearly be extended to big saws. There's the Sabu disc. The Sabu disc is an ancient Egyptian artifact from the First Dynasty, circa 3000 to 2800 BC. It was found by Walter Emery in 1936 in the north of the Saqqara necropolis, in Mastaba S3111, the grave of the ancient Egyptian official Sabu, after whom it is named. The function and meaning of the carefully crafted stone vessel are unclear, but when you look at it, your default inclinations are that it serves a functional, mechanical purpose. What that function is, no one knows. I would love to hear what you think it was used for. There is also the Dendera wheel in the Abydos temple. Now this is even more clearly functional. Aside from immediately disproving the fact that the Africans from Kemet didn't have the wheel, the Dendera stone has too many mechanical features to be just a decorative stone. For one, it is perfectly circular, and the Kemetu rarely carve circles for decorative purposes. The piece at the center of the stone looks perfectly fitted into the stone, almost as if it was meant to fit with another piece of machinery. Lastly, there are grooves, engravings along the surface. These large rectangular indentations look like they were hinges designed to hold something else. Also in the Temple of Hathor, there is another circular stone. Again, what is the purpose of this stone? We don't exactly know what they were used for, but they were clearly mechanical. For the longest time in quarries, archaeologists could see saw marks and drill marks that are indicative of machinery, but they have always been dismissed, and in many cases unreported. But they are there. And when you put those together with the fact that we now know that they had mechanical devices that they would even use as gimmicks in their temples, then there is no doubt that they used these techniques for building colossal temples, cutting gigantic stones and cutting small vases to ungodly precision. And this evidence shows that they did. If they can make doors open, they can have saws. In fact, Hero's engine was in use in multiple Kemetic temples for eons. The existence of this motor is immensely significant, and if ancient Egyptians could harness steam power, who are we to say that they did not use that engine or other similar engines in multiple other places, including temple building, stone cutting, hole drilling, and other mechanical devices? Well, they did, and there is plenty of clear evidence for it. In Abu Sir, there is an abundance of evidence that shows that machines were in use. I mean, look at this stone, and how clearly you can see the marks from the large circular saw they would have used. This alone shows that they had a machine-powered saw, and you cannot cut through hard stone like granite without having a saw that has a very fast blade tip. In fact, there is an unfinished sarcophagus in the Egyptian Museum of Antiquities. On it, you can clearly see that they started cutting into the rock at a wrong angle. Because of the error, they abandoned the exercise midpoint. This is great for us because we can see how deep they went into their cut before they stopped. If the feed rate of the saw was slow or moderate, then they would have caught the error within a few centimeters. But you can see that they continued cutting for at least 7 to 9 inches before realizing that they were completely off. The only way this could have happened is if their equipment was cutting through the stone at an incredibly fast rate. And remember, we are talking about basalt and granite, some of the hardest stones one can find. They rank 6 to 7 on the Mohs scale of hardness. Now this is where it gets interesting. If we assume that the Kemet ancient Egyptians had a saw of at least 1.5 meters in diameter, then according we at least need the blade to be rotating at 357 revolutions per minute in order to cut through granite and basalt, and that is with a diamond tip blade. Any slower and you risk glazing and poor cutting. 357 revolutions per minute is the slowest speed you would need. In order to get a high quality cut, you need to go much faster. You just cannot generate enough power manually to achieve these sorts of speeds, let alone maintain it for a good period of time. So where did they get that kind of mechanical power? Well, if we assume that they didn't have electricity, then Hero's engine would be the next candidate. It is simple to build, simple to scale to a larger size, and it can generate an enormous amount of power. Power that they can use to move their saws and other machines. And if you doubt that the ancient Egyptians could transfer that energy from the Hero's device to perform specific actions, well, we have direct evidence that they did. I will remind you of the quote from Heron. In chapter 37, Hero relates to us the miracle of temple doors that open by fire on an altar. And I quote, "On lighting a fire, the doors shall open spontaneously and shut again when the fire is extinguished. The heated air will drive out the liquid. The counterweight will open the doors. When the fire is extinguished, the weight shuts the doors." If ancient Egyptians Kemet had ways to make temple doors open by themselves, you can be sure that they would have used this tech, and many others they had in mechanical and engineering advantage in the building of the temples and pyramids. It's just that this knowledge was kept too secret.
Abu Sir, it's this beautiful slab. And if you look along the edge, it's been like just finely touched with some sort of powerful tool that's sort of been backed out. It's got, this thing's got markings all over. You have these giant circular saw depressions here and here.
Good Lord.
You can look at how many times this thing's been touched on.
What is this made of?
This is, I think it's schist. I think
Okay.
it's schist, or it's blue quartzite maybe. It's a very unique piece. I'm amazed it's still there because a couple people could probably move it. And it's just a remarkable piece of stone.
convenient, but that's nothing compared to the machining marks found on this drill core. The infamous Petrie's core number 7, found by Sir Flinders Petrie. And of course, the common Google debunker can search this up and find countless sources that irrefutably debunk this myth. But for those that can think for themselves, a little digging shows that something just doesn't make sense about this. Analyzing the core and wrapping a string of cotton around the grooves showed the drill marks produced a continuous spiral down the entire core, which the bow drill method doesn't do, but rather horizontal lines that look nothing like the authentic Egyptian cores. It doesn't end there. Analysis confirmed by fringe theorists like aerospace engineer Christopher Dunn, who worked with machining tools his entire life, suggested that after studying the spacing of the drill marks on this core, that the penetration rate of whatever method the ancient Egyptian used to drill this core must have been 500 times greater than our diamond drills today. His words, his conclusion. He obviously must be crazy. Now, that doesn't mean the drilling method was faster back then than it is today. It just means that, according to his calculations, these ancient drills had a greater vertical penetration for every rotation of the drill than today's technology.
Today, our society is at the danger of falling into the same error that the Kemet had. There is knowledge that could be life-saving, knowledge that could be life-extending, and knowledge that could bring a new transportation, an energy revolution that is being intentionally suppressed and in possession of a select few. This will hurt our progress to the benefit of other civilizations. This must be corrected, and our modern equivalent of the priest class needs to be broken apart, or at least a new way of work. A new mandate needs to prevail, so that both historical knowledge and true scientific discoveries aren't suppressed. It took us until the industrial age to even begin to understand the level of engineering and technology required to leave such marks, and it is absolutely remarkable that these marks are found in the oldest of temples. When we look at the drill holes, many researchers have claimed these were drilled with a tool that had an RPM rate far superior to what we can do today. First of all, it is almost impossible to infer the rotation rate of the drill if we don't have the feed rate. And since we were not present during the drilling of these holes, it is hard to infer. What we can say, however, is that these were mechanical tools, and not a manual process was used. The extreme precision of the holes, the uniform pattern of the holes, combined with the hardness of the stones, indicate that these holes were made with a device powered by a machine.
And it was actually, so it was cut right through here at the end and then snapped off. You can see that on the end here. Cut straight through. Here's some other looks at the circular saw marks on this thing. Absolutely amazing tooling marks in this. And,
Perfectly straight.
yeah, and you have, let me look, I think it's in statues. I want to show you the overcuts. Yeah, I mean, you have stuff like this, right? So this is at Karnak Temple. This is in an obelisk, and you literally have circular saw overcuts, and you see them on statues too, but you can literally see on this one here where it was exactly what you were talking about. Like,
you see right there, yeah.
It was reset, like the angle of the cut was reset.
Yep.
And it was some sort of giant circular saw because they start narrow, they start here and they penetrate and they get deeper, and then they peter out at the bottom. Like the profile fits a big circular saw.
Oh, remember when I said that the Greeks didn't invent this hero's engine? Well, there is precedence for this. There are so many inventions and discoveries attributed to the Greeks that definitely did not come from the Greeks. And we know this because those Greek savants studied in the Nubio-Kemetic civilization complex well before they wrote their sciences. And the other reason we know this is because the Greeks themselves said so. Take the case of Thales, for example, though who we attribute the 5 geometric principles. Guess how much time he spent in Africa before he ever wrote anything on geometry? What about the famous Pythagoras? Pythagoras stayed in Egypt for 22 years, studying philosophy, geometry, and medicine with the Egyptians' high priests before they deemed him worthy of their highest secrets. Same thing goes for Democritus, to whom we attribute the concept of rule by the will of the people. Well, he spent 5 years in Kemet, Egypt before he wrote his thesis. Same thing goes for Thales, Hecataeus, Eudoxus, who even spent a couple of years as an Egyptian priest before his writings. Plato. Yes, the famous Plato lived in Africa before his writings. Euclid, to who we attribute so many geometric theorems and more, learned from the Egyptian savants for years, and so many more. and in the words of the Greeks themselves, they admit that from their religion to their sciences and architecture, it all came from the Africans from Kemet. Quote, the mathematical arts were founded in Egypt, for there the priestly class was allowed to be at leisure. Or when Proclus, one of the last Greek classical philosophers, tells us clearly that, quote, geometry was first invented in Egypt. Thales, having been there, transferred this knowledge to Greece. Why is that our historians never mention this? And worse, why is it that our history books and grade teachers continue to maintain that Thales was one of the fathers of geometry? Or why is it that we never hear of Iamblichus's writing where he clearly states that he, Pythagoras, visited all of the Egyptian priests, acquiring all the wisdom each possessed? Or of the writings of Diogenes where he states, quote, he, Plato, never had any teacher except during the time that he went to Egypt and associated with the priests? Or even more telling, of the writings of Strabo, the famous Greek geographer who tells us that, quote, the priests of Egypt are said to have been, for the most part, astronomers and philosophers, and devised the solar reckoning of the year. This is all too convenient to forget when the writers of the time tell us that the foundation of European civilization came directly from the Africans. Yes, the Greeks tell us that even their use of the calendar came from the Africans in Kemet. Quote, the Egyptians discovered the year and divided it into 12 parts. Since Heron is said to have discovered this steam motor while living in Africa, after studying with the Nubio-Kemetic priests, we must, just as we failed to do with other Greek thinkers, attribute his inventions to the Africans. And in fact, Heron says so himself, that the Egyptians had means of moving objects via mechanical power in their temples. And when we see the signs of machining all over Egypt, the Nubio-Kemetic civilization, then we shouldn't dismiss them as anomalies, nor should we attribute them to an alien force. The more logical explanation is that they used a motor capable of generating enormous amounts of power. Power strong enough to cut through the hardest of stone. And who knows, they may even have used it for transportation. Once you can generate enough power, it is conceivable that you could transport a 75-ton stone block. It doesn't explain the logistics, but it does help explain the power requirements. And we will explore that in the next video. Really? No, really. You are one of those people who went the whole video without clicking the like button? Shame on you.
Found that when the gas relieving the jets reaches the speed of sound, it can't go any faster.
This is in an obelisk, and you literally have circular saw overcuts, and you see them on statues too. But you can literally see on this one here where it was exactly what you were talking about. Like,
oh yeah, you see right there. Yeah.
Don't miss our episode on one of the greatest athletes in America and how he was eliminated before he became president.
But it seems so obvious to me and several other questioners that something was used here that they're just refusing to even acknowledge. Just like the scoop marks they found around the unfinished mega obelisk at Aswan, which
I'm a strong proponent of the value for value model. If you feel this video provided you with some value, I would be immensely grateful if you could return that value. You can help by sharing the video, donating, or even just commenting on your appreciation of our work. It goes a long way. Join us and see how those who are said to be without history birthed civilization itself.